So you think you're a pretty curious person and you've got curiosity all figured out? Cool, but I'm about to flip that idea on its head. In today's episode, we'll see how curiosity isn't just something you feel, it's something you can actually drive and direct wherever you want. We're gonna dig into why curiosity might actually beat intelligence when it comes to success. Why did some of the biggest names out there swear by their curiosity as their biggest strength? Why thirst for knowledge isn't just some fancy phrase. And ever wonder why little kids ask a million questions, but adults kinda stop? Albert Einstein, yeah, that genius guy once said, "I'm not particularly talented. I'm just super curious." He always said it wasn't his brainpower that made him successful, it was his endless curiosity. And honestly, folks like Leonardo da Vinci, Marie Curie, Thomas Edison, and Richard Feynman totally agreed with him. They all believed that their crazy accomplishments in science, art, and tech had way more to do with being insanely curious than being born geniuses. And honestly, they were spot on. Think about how we actually learn stuff. It usually happens one of two ways. Either we actively decide to go after something and really study it, that's active learning. Or stuff just kinda sneaks into our brains by accident, that's passive learning. Remember how it was back in school? You'd show up to class, and if the subject was even remotely interesting, you'd actually pay attention, try to figure things out, maybe even remember a few things. But if it was boring? Forget it. You'd totally zone out, daydream about random stuff, and only pick up something new if it somehow grabbed your attention by accident. And what's the secret sauce that grabs our attention when we're learning? Curiosity. Every time. There's this study by Matthias Gruber that showed something super cool. When we're genuinely curious about something, our brain's dopamine circuits fire up like crazy. It actually builds a much stronger connection between the reward center and the hippocampus, the part that helps with memory. Basically, when we're into something, our brain goes into full-on learning mode. Everything that needs to kick in, kicks in, and on top of that, it gives us little, feel-good, rewards along the way. But when we don't care, it's like, one ear in, other ear out, nothing sticks, and we don't even notice. So yeah, curiosity is the trigger for attention when it comes to learning. Something catches your interest, maybe you already walked into class curious, or maybe the teacher just said one random thing that grabbed you, boom, you're locked in. You start digging into the topic, you learn something new, your brain throws you a dopamine party, and now you're even more pumped to keep learning. It's a cycle, the more you get curious, the more you learn, the smarter you get. If you want to grow, you gotta learn. If you want to learn, you gotta be curious. And if you want to be curious, you need to actually care about what you're learning. Even if you're naturally smart in some field or have a knack for it, it doesn't guarantee you'll grow there unless you're genuinely interested. That's why nowadays curiosity is considered even more important than talent. Because if you're into something, you'll keep learning and pushing through the tough parts, even if you're not naturally gifted. Oh, and by the way, people sometimes use curiosity, interest, and inquisitiveness like they're the same thing, but technically, they're a little different. Just a heads up. Curiosity is basically our natural drive to find new info, experiences, or just learn new stuff. It's actually one of the 6 core emotions, along with disgust, joy, fear, anger, and sadness. When we get hit with curiosity, it pushes us to dig deeper and figure out more about whatever grabbed our attention. So yeah, curiosity is a feeling. And when that feeling's strong enough, it sparks what we call inquisitiveness, that urge to dive in and really explore something. Now, if while exploring we get good vibes and satisfying experiences, that initial curiosity grows into something deeper, we call that interest. And sometimes when interest gets super intense, when it becomes a major part of who you are and how you live your life, that's when it turns into passion. See the pattern? That's why asking, "How do I find my passion?" doesn't really make sense. You don't go hunting for passion, it grows from curiosity. And if you've got it, trust me, you already know. If you don't, no big deal, it just means it hasn't been born yet. Simple as that. Picture 3 kids, Emma, James, and William, sitting in class learning about the solar system. Their teacher asked them to draw the 8 planets. Now Emma used to be super curious about why people don't live on other planets. That curiosity pushed her to dive deep into galaxies, space exploration, astronomy articles, you name it. She even spent nights stargazing, and the more she learned, the more she dreamed about going to space someday. But today, Emma's checked out. She's totally bored because she already knows all this stuff. Nothing the teacher is saying feels new or exciting to her anymore. James and William? Well, science has never really been their thing. Kinda boring if you ask them. But during the lesson, James remembers this TikTok he saw, something about planets. And now he's confused. Why is the teacher only talking about 8 planets? What happened to the 9th one? That little gap in what he thought he knew bugs him enough that he's suddenly really paying attention, hoping the teacher will explain. Meanwhile, William's got other priorities. He dreams of being an artist, so he's all about the drawing part of the assignment. He couldn't care less about the planets themselves, he just loves that the teacher praises his artwork. So he's tuned in, but not to learn about space, just to keep the compliments coming. So out of these 3, who's actually curious about the topic today? It's not Emma. She's got an interest in space, sure, but not in this lesson because there's nothing new here for her. It's not William. He's chasing praise, not knowledge. It's James. James is the curious one today. He's got a real, burning question, and curiosity is all about needing to fill those knowledge gaps. James is basically deep in that curiosity mode right now. You can think of curiosity like a mental hunger, a cognitive craving. And honestly, we usually feel it the most when we hit what's called an information gap. That gap, that missing piece of knowledge, is what pushes us to want to know more and more. Just like James, he knew something about planets, but suddenly realized there's a missing piece. And boom, his brain has to fill it in. It doesn't even have to be something smart or super important. Like, have you ever seen a picture of a celebrity and just could not remember their name? You sit there racking your brain like, I know this person, they were in that movie, what's their name? You can practically feel yourself squeezing your brain trying to spit it out. That right there? That's cognitive deprivation, a fancy way of saying your brain is itching hard for missing info. And it's super uncomfortable. Like, almost physically annoying. So what do? You Google it. You search for the movie, find the cast list, and bam, there's the name. Sweet relief. The second you fill that gap, your brain hits you with a little dopamine rush, that feel-good, ah moment. You satisfied your mental hunger. Mission accomplished. Or think about it like this, you get a notification on your phone, but you can't check it right away. How does that feel? It's like pure torture, right? Same thing when you see some clickbait headline, why did those celebs break up? Or who got caught taking bribes? Or what's going down in the next episode? You have to know. That urge to find out? That's deprivation kicking in, it's that itch in your brain. When we're curious, we physically feel that need for missing info. It's a real hunger, not just a cute metaphor, a serious craving to fill that gap. Now let's compare food and information for a second. There's this scientific model. I'll drop the study links later if you want the full nerd version. Basically, when your body's low on food, you feel hunger. Hunger sparks appetite. Appetite makes you go find food. You eat, you feel full. Simple. The brain works almost the same way with information. When your brain spots a knowledge gap, you feel uncertainty, that cognitive hunger. That uncertainty sparks curiosity. Curiosity drives you to search for answers. And when you finally get the answer, boom, satisfaction. So appetite is the drive to eat and fix your physical hunger. Curiosity is the drive to find info and fix your psychological discomfort, your brain hunger. The whole system is pretty much identical. Except, curiosity is actually more like sexual desire than physical hunger. Because if you don't find food and satisfy hunger, you'll eventually die. But if you don't satisfy your curiosity, you'll live, just maybe a little bit annoyed. Now if we can't close an information gap, or satisfy, let's say, other cravings most of the time, nothing terrible actually happens to us. Here's something interesting though. Hunger and appetite work pretty predictably. The longer you go without food, the hungrier you get. Straight line up. But curiosity and desire? They're more like a U-shaped curve. If the information gap gets too big, or if you go too long without satisfying a craving, your brain might just give up. Curiosity dies. Desire fades. And here's a really important piece, the thing that can trap us in a cycle of junk information and zero real growth. When you're hungry, you're just hungry. Doesn't matter if it's pizza or cereal, you just want something to fill the void. But not every information gap actually sparks curiosity. When we're kids, everything's new and exciting. We're drowning in information gaps. We don't know jack about the world yet, so our brains are constantly curious, constantly asking why. Some kids bug their parents with endless whys, and others just quietly go digging for answers themselves. But either way, their brains are in nonstop exploration mode, trying to figure the world out. As we get older though, we learn more, we fill in a ton of those gaps, and naturally, curiosity slows down. We stop asking why every 5 minutes. But the mechanism? It never goes away. We still ask questions, just fewer and usually deeper ones. Social media is a perfect example of this. It feels like we're being curious, scrolling, clicking, looking for info, but a lot of the time we're just feeding ourselves low-quality answers to questions we didn't even mean to ask. We scroll mindlessly through our feeds all the time, just automatically looking for something new to catch our eye. And when something does grab our attention, boom, we stop, read it, watch it, dive a little deeper. So yeah, the curiosity mechanism is still working, we're just not always using it in ways that actually help us. Going back to our food analogy, some people live completely on junk food. Some people meticulously build themselves a perfect, balanced plate. But honestly, that's rare. Most of us are somewhere in between. We love a good, quality meal now and then. But most of the time, we're too tired, too busy, too lazy, whatever, and we just grab whatever's easy. Fast and done. Same thing with information. You've got people who honestly don't care much about learning. They just binge entertainment, social media, gossip, TV shows, clickbait articles, easy-to-digest books, light YouTube stuff. Then you've got people on the opposite end. They're constantly feeding their brains with serious stuff, scientific books, textbooks, classic literature, tough documentaries, heavy courses, always learning, growing, evolving. But most people? We're hanging out right in the middle. A little junk, a little gourmet. Some lazy scrolling, some real studying. It's just life. So yeah, sometimes we scroll, we have fun, we learn a little, and sometimes we get poisoned too. Like, you watch the morning news and boom, your mood is wrecked for the whole day. Or you pick up some random piece of misinformation without even realizing it. Here's the big thing. We seriously need to rethink our information plate. We gotta pay attention to how much junk info we're consuming versus how much good stuff we're feeding our brains. And honestly, the more quality info we pack into our day, the smarter we'll become. No magic, just basic brain nutrition. Because reminder that information hunger never goes away. We feel it all day long. And if all we're doing is snacking on TikToks, doom-scrolling news, gossip, quick little dopamine hits that give us nothing long-term, by the end of the day, we'll be too full of junk to have any real appetite for something truly valuable. So here's the deal. First, notice what actually sparks your curiosity and what just mindlessly entertains you. Second, every now and then, do a little dopamine detox. Clean up your info plate. Seriously. And in line with social media? It hooks us with that quick dopamine hit. That's why it feels interesting and why it's so dang addictive. But here's the real question. Why does forgetting an actress's name drive us crazy, but forgetting some math theorem doesn't even bother us? Why do we sometimes have a gap in knowledge that's actually useful and smart, but still feel zero curiosity about it? It all comes down to this little thing in our brain called the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC if you want to sound cool. Basically, the OFC decides how much we value stuff. Like, it's the part that tells you, chocolate, broccoli, when you're picking a snack. When you make a choice, your brain picks whatever it thinks will bring you the most reward, the most dopamine. That's why kids almost always grab the chocolate. For them, broccoli's value is basically zero. Now, a team led by Tommy Blanchard did a study to see if the OFC also works when we're choosing what information to go after. Turns out, yep, it does. The orbitofrontal cortex lights up not just for food, water, sex, all that survival stuff, but also when we're curious about information. And here's the crazy part. When we're really curious, we'll actually give up other rewards just to get that juicy piece of information. Curious info literally becomes a reward by itself. That's exactly why sometimes we forget to eat, drink, or even sleep when we're super into something. That's how we fall into what's called flow state. So the answer to why forgetting an actress's name makes our brain itch, but forgetting some math theorem doesn't, it's actually pretty simple. Math just doesn't feel valuable to you. Now, if you took a mathematician, someone who doesn't really care about movies, and they forgot an important theorem, that would make their brain itch like crazy, not the actress's name. Which brings us to another huge takeaway. You've got to reassess the value you're assigning to different types of information. Next time you notice you've hit an information gap, but you don't feel that urge to dig deeper, hit pause for a sec. Ask yourself, why don't I care? Same thing when you do feel super curious about something. Ask, why does this grab me so much? In theory, if we could tweak how we value information, bumping up the value of useful knowledge and lowering the value of junk, we could get way smarter, way faster. But here's the catch. You can't just snap your fingers and trick your brain. It doesn't buy BS that easily. If you want your brain to actually value some piece of information, you have to feel it's important. And one of the easiest ways to do that? Tie it to a goal. Let's go back to our food analogy for a sec. Why do you hit up a nice restaurant every now and then? Not just to kill your hunger, but to relax, have a good time, hang out with friends, enjoy the experience. The goal is to chill. And while you're chilling, you also happen to eat some quality food. Same thing with information. When you set a goal and start working toward it, at some point you realize, crap, I'm missing some key info. That missing piece creates an information gap. And that gap sparks real curiosity because it's standing in your way. That's why learning tied to a clear goal feels way easier. Even when it's tough to understand something, you somehow find the energy to keep pushing, keep trying until it clicks. Because you actually care about reaching your goal. And that's why learning random stuff with no real goal feels like pure torture. If your brain doesn't see the point, it's like, ugh, why are we even doing this? Like, seriously, why would we bother learning a language we're never gonna use? Or pick up some random skill that doesn't lead anywhere? Our brain's just not interested. It doesn't hand out dopamine for stuff it thinks is pointless. And without dopamine? Forget it. No motivation, no focus, and your memory's gonna be trash too. So if you're not feeling curious about something, it probably means for right now that info has zero real value to you. But here's the good news. You can create that value. Just tie the information to a goal you actually care about. Once you do that, the value of the info shoots up, your curiosity kicks in, and suddenly learning doesn't feel like pulling teeth anymore. And that's the third key to hacking your own curiosity. That's all for today, folks. If you like this episode, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Next time, we're diving into some super practical tools to help you reboot your curiosity, reignite that craving for experience, and boost the value of useful info in your brain. Stay tuned.